Welcome, everybody, to the Needham Free Public Library. The Friends of the Needham Library are pleased to present Anita Diamant, author of Period, End of Sentence. Anita is a novelist, journalist, and essayist who lives in Brookline. She's the author of 5 novels, 5 guidebooks to contemporary Jewish life, and 2 other books, including her latest, Period, End of Sentence, which brings us here today. Anita's best-known book, The Red Tent, was published in 1997. How many people read The Red Tent? Okay. She took, as you know then, she took her inspiration from a few lines in Genesis chapter 24 that mentioned Dinah, an obscure and overlooked character who was the only daughter of Jacob and Leah. In the book, Dinah tells her own sweeping story of mothers and sisters and lovers, loyalty and betrayal. I was going to say, in case you're one of the few people who hasn't read it, but those people aren't here today. There's one more thing that you do need to know about The Red Tent, which you probably all remember well. The title's reference to a special place where women got together when they had their period. They dished, they educated each other, they figured things out. It was a wonderful womb-like place that I think we probably all wish we could retreat to at least once a month, if not more. So perhaps it's no surprise that when it was time for a book about menstrual justice to be written, the assignment made its way to our guest. On behalf of the Friends of the Needham Public Library, it's an honor to warmly welcome Anita Diamant.
Can I just, how long do we know each other, Margaret?
Well, we met the summer after I graduated from college.
So what year was that?
In 1975. She's my close friend.
Yes, we've been friends a long time.
We're going to do this program in an interview format. I'm going to ask Anita a zillion questions, and then we'll have Q&A from the audience. I'll ask her questions for about 40 minutes, then we'll have about 20 minutes of Q&A. And we also have a special message from Patricia Doyle, who's here to talk about Days for Girls, which is very relevant to our subject today. So please wait until you hear from her before you leave. So Anita, whoops, wrong question. Anita.
Margaret.
One of the big themes in Period End of Sentence is that we need to overcome the taboo against talking about our periods and menstruation. It's a difficult subject. And I will notice that other than the cool guy from the Needham Channel who's helping us with AV today, we're all women in this audience. My husband had no interest in coming. It's not a subject for general conversation in general, but it probably should be. So in order to break the ice, I'm proposing that we talk about our own first periods. Anita, what's your story?
I do not remember at all. I don't remember. I know my mother didn't tell me anything about it. A girlfriend must have told me about it. I have no memory at all. The only early memory I have is it was in the summer and I wanted to go swimming and I was going to put a tampon in if it killed me. And I remember being in the bathroom at a pool and a friend was on the other side of the door talking me through it. I don't remember much more about it than that, but it was a success. And I did go swimming.
Well, I'm impressed that you started with tampons.
I didn't start. I probably had pads. I do not remember anything. I mean, it was probably, just shut down.
Yeah.
My mother didn't take me to buy a bra either. So it was like, I was on my own in this universe. So I'm always interested to hear other people's stories because I really can't retrieve mine at all.
Well, my mother never showed me how to shave my legs, but she did tell me about menstruation. But it happened in a sort of ideal way. We were going camping at Lake George, and my good friend Patty Toosling was coming with us, and she was 1 year older. And wouldn't you know, just before she was about to go camping with the Pantridges, she got her first ever period. And her mother, who was my mother's close friend, said, well, I wouldn't let you go with anybody else, but Aunt Barbara will help you with your period. So the entire time, we were in the tent whispering about her period. She had to change her pad up in the outhouse. And so I learned all about it by proxy through my friend. I didn't actually have my period, but I learned all the details.
I think women with sisters, older sisters, often, you know, it's just sort of part of the culture in the household.
Makes
That's where
sense.
you learn it, yeah.
So I'm thinking of writing a book about my experience, and I'm going to call it The Green Tent. Okay, so can you tell us the story about how you came to write, period, end of sentence?
Sure. It came to me. I didn't go looking for it. I had watched the Academy Awards in 2018 when the movie, period, end of sentence, won an Academy Award for Best Short Documentary. And they announced it, and these very young women, including a couple of college students, ran up to the podium, and the director, who's maybe 30, lifted up the Oscar and said, "I can't believe a movie about periods just won an Oscar." And a lot of the lady movie stars got up and, you know, shrieked and clapped, and I jumped off the couch and clapped. And the next day I watched the film, it was on Netflix. It's still on Netflix. It's like 20 minutes long. It's very good. I thought it was really interesting. And I had actually written a couple of pieces for Cognoscenti, which is the WBUR kind of op-ed page, about menstrual justice in the year before, because it was on the front page of the New York Times. That's another story. But anyway, the people who made the movie made the rounds in New York. They were on the Today Show, and they were on all those shows. And they went to talk to a book agent, who was my agent, and they were looking for someone to do sort of a companion book. And Melissa, who wrote the preface and was one of the founders of this organization, saw my book, and she said, "Do you know her, and do you think she'd be interested?" So she called me, and I said, "Yeah, I'd be interested. I'd be happy to talk about this because it's a subject that I'm interested in." So we talked, and it was going to be a year-long project for me, and they talked about sending me to India, which would have been impossible. And then COVID hit. So this was my COVID project. And if you were around me, I complained a lot about how hard it was because the subject is so enormous. It was much bigger than I realized, and the idea, trying to figure out how to hit as many points as possible without being completely shallow in all regards was the challenge. But I was really glad actually to have a project.
Well, it's an issue that's as big as the whole world.
It is, yeah. No, there's references to almost all continents, I think, in the book, yeah. Mm-hmm. Including Days for Girls, which you'll hear about later.
Can you just give us a quick summary of the issue of menstrual justice and the worldwide movement that's addressing it?
It's a big question.
Yeah, the elevator speech.
Yeah, it's hard. Menstruation has been a taboo and a source of shame and degradation for women in many, many cultures around the world for a very long time. And within the last decade, it's really not that long. And actually, I want to say that like the United Nations and certain international organizations have been working on this issue quietly within the context of other kinds of health issues. But within the last decade or so, led in large part by really young women and girls, college students, junior high school students, the notion that this should be a source of shame, they're sort of like, why? You know, they were raised, I think, by the second or third wave of women who grew up less loath to talk about what was important in their lives, and so maybe they didn't all get the great education they needed, but there was less shame in their lives, and they have been at the forefront of bringing it up and saying, why don't we have tampons in all the school bathrooms? And they aren't willing to take no for an answer. So just one favorite story is there was a high school in the Midwest, and the girls went to the principal and said, "Why are there no products in the bathrooms?" And he said, because they would abuse the privilege. So they went home and baked cookies that looked like tampons.
That look like what?
Tampons. They really looked like tampons, and they posted it on, I don't know, on Twitter and Facebook, and it was shared a lot, and the principal was mortified. And there are now period products in all the bathrooms, and that's cool. And the girls called themselves the Revolutionary Baking Club, and they had a website up for a little while, which got taken down. I'm sure their parents were like, didn't want them to get hate mail, but they on their website talked about connected period advocacy with other issues in the world, women's rights, the climate. I mean, so they really see this as connected. Mm-hmm. So it's I have great faith in the coming coming wave of girls and women who are leading the charge here.
How much did you actually know about menstruation before you delved into this topic for your book?
I was shocked to learn how little I knew, to be perfectly honest. Of course, I
was too when I read the book.
Yeah.
I was shocked at how uninterested I was in the subject until I read the book. And then I was really interested. But anyway, continue.
One of my early conversations, which was actually in person, was with a friend who's a nurse and a Planned Parenthood nurse. And she actually, maybe she realized how little I knew. She sort of drew me a picture of the system and talked about how it worked. And I went, I kind of knew all the parts, but I really didn't understand the physiology of menstruation at all. And she was talking to me about things like birth control pills, and that the only reason you stop taking them for 5 days is because doctors thought women would be upset if they didn't have, because you don't have your period. If you keep taking them all month, it doesn't hurt you. You just don't have a period. But the doctors thought women would want their period. It would make them feel like they were real women. And this is still a subject of debate. Some women really think that's bad, but if you stop taking the pill, you're perfectly fertile immediately. It's not like it. But there's just all this stuff that she talked to me about. But I really now have a clear picture of fallopian tubes and uterus, and I know how it works. And I learned this, of course, way past menopause, so it didn't do me any good. Except for this book. That's not true. And I think teaching our kids, all genders, all in the same room, is how we get out of this mess.
Mm-hmm. I guess the thing that really killed me the most in reading the book was to learn about conditions in the third world. I never really thought about it. And here in America, the land of plenty, or in Needham, you don't worry so much about what are you going to do when you get your period. But in the third world, there's problems just getting pads and tampons, let alone all the other issues surrounding it. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things you learned that surprised and took you aback around the world?
Another giant question. Let me just start by saying there are people in this zip code who lack what they need.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
That, I mean, it's very easy to say, oh, the poor, oh, the developing nations, oh, rural South. It's everywhere. There was one of the other things I wrote about for Cognoscenti was there was a girl at Brookline High School who wrote a piece for her high school op-ed, for the newspaper, and someone on city council saw it, and she brought it to city council, and there are now period products in all the municipal buildings in Brookline. Wow. So this teenager knew that there were kids in her high school, I don't think that included herself, who needed and didn't have and had to scrounge and had to scramble. And I can't tell you the number of people I've talked to whose school nurses were the people who saved their lives, but you have to get a pass to go see a school nurse. And why do you have to have a pass? You're not sick. And then the nurses wind up paying for them, for the most part, because it's not in the school budget. So let's just get rid of the idea that this is just over there and far away in them. However, there are parts of the world where women and girls don't have access to even the most basic things that they need to manage their periods. And that includes water and safe bathrooms and a way to get rid of your menstrual stuff and a place to wash your hands. And all of that intersects. But the most obvious thing is that they don't have the means to safely and cleanly take care of their menstrual periods. And again, I have to say that there's this kind of first world, they use rags. Well, our ancestors used rags. That's what we had. And it was cloth. It's old cloth. However, in parts of the world, when you're finished with your bloodied cloth, if you wash it and hang it up, that means everybody knows you've had your period. And because this is such a shameful, taboo thing, you can't hang them up, which means they don't dry properly, which means you can get an infection. So that's just a little piece of it. And also the whole business about shame. There's a story early on which was brought to my attention by the PAD Project people of a young girl in southern India who had an accident at school. She bled through her school uniform, and the teacher made fun of her and threw something bloody on the floor, and she went home, and 2 days later she committed suicide. Now, of course, you can't always draw a straight line, but she's not the only story like that. And the fact that it's a catastrophe to bleed through your clothes as opposed to an accident, I think that sort of sums up how dire the situation is for people. You know, we tend to focus on getting products to people, but without clean water, you know, ways to dispose of things. There's all kinds of environmental issues also. And so it is the essence of an intersectional issue. That's one thing I learned, what intersectional really means.
Yeah.
And that menstrual injustice is water, is disposing of things, it's access to it's safety.
Education.
Oh, I'm sorry, big one, education. And if you watch the film, it's shot in a small, tiny village in India, and what is unknown is kind of shocking. The mothers don't know to tell their daughters. The daughters don't know. The boys and men are completely clueless. It's like it's obviously happening, but it's totally taboo to talk about it. And the costs of that are really, really high.
And so girls sometimes stay home from school,
yes, a lot,
because they don't have the materials to manage their periods, and then they fall behind in school.
And then there's another fact that in some parts of the world, when a girl starts her period, she becomes marriageable. Mm-hmm. And if her parents don't want their 13-year-old, 14, 12-year-old daughter to get married, she is on the market, and there's harassment about getting her married. So in addition to all of the health and safety and educational concerns, there is this sort of like protecting a child from child marriage, which is another issue. But that becomes an issue once a girl starts menstruating. So menstruation puts you in danger in many places. So it's a lot to clean up. It's a lot of a mess to clean up.
Did you read did you learn any hopeful stories about countries that are making progress toward menstrual justice?
Yes. I think Ireland is winning the sweepstakes at the moment. I don't think it's a surprise that there's a female prime minister in Ireland. I think Ireland, they passed the law that mandated period products in every municipal building in all the schools. It's going to take, I don't think it's happened like that. It doesn't happen real quickly. That has to be followed through. But in Ireland, in New Zealand, another female prime minister, it's very much on the books. I think there's a national experiment in putting period products everywhere. Massachusetts, by the way, just passed the I Am law, which has taken a long time to get through the legislature, which will make period products available in schools and shelters. I'm not sure about prisons, and prisons are a real nightmare. But so it's very piecemeal. You know, the progress we make is very piecemeal. And yet I get concerned. I could just talk to somebody, a reporter, about, well, in Japan they've had menstrual leave for years, and it's like, yeah, it's on the books, but nobody uses it. And women are afraid to ask for it because they'll get fired. And the people in the businesses, there's no oversight. So nobody offers it and nobody asks for it. So just because something is on the books, if the culture is still really patriarchal and you're supposed to show up if you're sick no matter what, and if you have a migraine no matter what, then it doesn't matter whether you have your period or not, or if there's a law protecting you.
It's so interesting that Ireland is so much in the forefront now. I read somewhere recently that Ireland is the only country that went directly from the 19th century to the 21st century without pass and go.
There's a great story about there was an MP who showed up late for her session in Congress, and she said, "I'm sorry, I'm a few minutes late. I had my period. I had to go to the bathroom." And none of the men, all of that didn't melt down. And she went on to talk about how expensive menstrual products were and how they shouldn't be taxed. So she used her own experience. I don't know if she really had her period, but she certainly used that as a way to bring up a topic that a lot of people don't want to hear about on the floor of the House of Commons. So they didn't drag her out by the hair screaming, and they had to take it.
Menstrual leave in the workplace you talk about in the book, and that's a tough issue. I kind of see it either way. Can you talk a little bit about that issue and why it's difficult to know what is the right solution?
It's very much in the news. Spain is about to become the first nation to mandate menstrual leave. and as a nation. You know, there are municipalities here and there are businesses here and there, and whenever a big business does this, it's big news. It's in the New York Times business section. So the idea of menstrual leave is tricky, and it breaks down for the most part along age lines. Women over a certain age are very nervous about the idea that menstrual leave will be an excuse to not advance women's careers, to not hire women. Oh, you know, they don't produce as much. That, you know, it's like all those women who have periods and are miserable and show up at work, they produce anyway, as we all know. So there's that this threatens the gains that we have made in the workplace and elsewhere. On the other side of it is the idea that half the working population at some point is having their periods, and some percentage of them have pain, have suffering, and some of that pain and suffering has been endured for a long period of time without treatment, and that winds up being endometriosis and other kinds of conditions that can be really dangerous. But you're supposed to suck it up and go to work and pretend that it's not happening. So, and again, Gloria Steinem in 1974 wrote an essay called "If Men Menstruated," and of course, if men menstruated, they would have, you know, it would only be a 3-week work month. But the idea, not all women need to take time off, and not all women will take time off. And, but there are people who have migraines, who have really serious pain, and they don't take it seriously, and they work through it. And I think it really kind of rocks the boat about how we think about workers. You know, workers are supposed to be like widgets, right?
Yeah.
They're interchangeable. Well, we're not. And of course, women also do all the unpaid labor of childcare and who's taking the kid to the doctor and who's taking her elderly father to the doctor, and all of that is happening at the same time. So they're all connected.
I suppose the fear is that every woman will take every period off every time.
Right.
I don't think that's true.
No, it's not. But it's nice to know that if you're having a really miserable month, that you don't have to use your 5 days. You know, first of all, medical leave is so limited, especially in the United States. So if you really have to take a day off or 2 days off every month, you're going to burn through your medical leave. And what if you have an appendicitis?
Right.
So it's really unfair. It assumes a male body for all workers, and so that's a kind of a big shift.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not just talking about period products here. We are talking about really rejiggering the way we think about human beings and the way we treat each other.
Now, this was a very serious book, but I laughed out loud when you talked about some of the wacko beliefs that men have about women and their periods.
Yeah.
Some
woman, when I think on her Facebook page, I can't remember where, just said, "Send me the stupidest thing a man ever said to you about your period." And some of them were really horrible and shocking, and some of them were like, you know, I've been married for 4 years, and I told my husband I had my period, and he said, "Again?" And somebody else said, she told her boyfriend, I can't do X, Y, or Z. I've got my period. He said, well, can't you just? It was his birthday celebration, and she said, I just want to put it off. I'm not feeling great. I have my period. And he said, can't you just hold on to it for a day or two, and then just like control it, and do it after school. Right? It's like, so there's those, and then there are really there's some really shocking, horrible ones. There is a belief in some cultures that having a period shows that you've had sex. So, furious father with his 15-year-old daughter was convinced this proved that she was sexually active, and he beat her. So, it ranges from the ridiculous to the frightening. But the fact that men know so little about the biology of women, wouldn't it be nice if they didn't say dumb things like that? It'd be nice if our sons as well, are taught that this is normal part of, if you're going to be living with women in your life, then you need to know these things. And I'm your mother, and it happened to me. So yeah. I only have a daughter. So.
Too late, I think. I'll let my son's girlfriend educate him about that at this point. Now let's talk a little bit about how you wrote the book. You did it during the pandemic, mostly in your office, by email and phone. How did you track down leads and develop the information that was presented in the book? It must have been sort of a detective story in a way.
Well, I have a Google Alerts for menstruation, which I still have, and every day I get at least a half a dozen stories. So there's a global, there's a global reach with internet. So I got stories from India, and I got stories from Spain, and I got stories from hither and yon. Actually, one of the best leads came from in person, which is the way they usually do. Early on, I spoke to a group of students at Harvard Medical School. They were graduate students here internationally, and one of them was from New Zealand. And she told me about this woman who was an academic who had written a lot about menstruation. So I got her name, and I emailed her, and we had this lovely exchange. I got her books, which was some doing, but I learned so much as a result of this human contact and this email contact with this wonderful writer. I learned a lot about the Maori, native Maori customs and how they were squashed by white colonial Christian men who came to, said, that's disgusting what you're doing, celebrating this, what are you doing? And how it's being reclaimed in contemporary times. So that's the best kind of connection to make and of research. You find somebody who finds someone else who then finds, and then she connected me with people in Hawaii, and then there are Native American cultures. She also referred me to people in California and Canada. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole there's a sort of conversation going on among Native peoples, Native women in particular, about the traditions, about their needs. There's tremendous period poverty in Canada among First Nations. So there's that whole chatter that I got to learn about that. But then I would stumble across things online. If you're looking, you find them. So a lot from India.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of anthropology in this book.
Yeah, it's kind of contemporary anthropology, which means it's very dated almost immediately, because like there's a mention in here that period taxes are sales tax on products. So not everybody, and they're not national, they're state and city. So you get to choose what you're taxing. So in Louisiana, there was taxes on period products, but not on Mardi Gras beads. But that's changed. That's no longer true. So that's in this book. It's not true anymore because things change quickly.
Now there's anthropology.
Yeah, there's anthropology, but it's dated anthropology.
Now here's the question we all want to know. Was the red tent real? Is there anything like the red tent in the world? And if not, how did you come up with it? And have you found any substitute, anything sort of kind of like the red tent in your life?
In my life?
Or our lives.
I'll start with the red tent.
Free associate on that topic, please.
There is no red tent. I made up that little world. Also, it was not just for menstruation, it was for childbirth and illness. So it was a place of care. It was also, I want to say, in the middle of the community, so it was not a secret where they were going. And I made that up too. I based it on, there have been menstrual tents, and this is what I knew then. There have been menstrual tents and huts in pre-modern civilized cultures throughout the world for a long, long time. So it's not impossible that there was something like this. But I made it up. And what I did find about it was kind of horrific. In parts of Africa, girls were sent out in huts by themselves, alone and endangered. And the pieces I read in the New York Times that made me write about this was about this custom in Chapati in Nepal, where you're not supposed to sleep in the same house as other people because your father will die if he's got someone bleeding in the house with you. So, and these girls are sent off into the woods, and they die by smoke inhalation, by animals killing them, and by attacks by men. So it can be as grim as possible. But when I did the research for this book, I found a couple of amazing, more than a couple, several amazing stories. So there's the Maori stuff, which is in here. There's a wonderful story about a tribe in California, which is reclaiming a very beautiful, complicated ritual for girls at their first menstruation, which was a strenuous community. I mean, there was a race in it. You have to learn how to make you have to learn how to make the things that Native women made. But it was, you had to sort of do a race, and people would come and sing with you as you ran. I mean, it was a big party is the wrong word. It was a ritual, beautiful ritual, joyful ritual, a lot of singing and dancing. There is such a thing as the Red Tent in northern Pakistan, in a small tribe, sort of a Hindu tribe, and I don't know how much longer they'll be on the planet, but they have I can't remember the word for it anymore. They have a tent. It's not a tent, it's a hut in the middle of the village. And a woman wrote about it who was, an anthropologist was there, and she got to go into the hut. And she said, you know, the women there relaxed, they took naps, they drank tea, they took off these beautiful but very heavy necklaces they wore, they gossiped, they helped girls figure out how to elope or how to avoid eloping. She said, I can only describe it as a slumber party. So this is a small tribe in northern Pakistan, and the pressures of the modern world are all upon them. But that, it does exist. There actually was such a place. There's customs in India where women still don't go into the kitchen when they're menstruating because there's this sense that you will spoil the food. One of my neighbors said he didn't understand why his mother didn't go in the kitchen until way later in his life. It wasn't discussed. It's just that, you know, she said, would you go in there and get me X, Y, and Z? And he didn't understand why until much later.
Well, what did our brothers think when our families were at the beach and the girls couldn't go in the water and they were muttering to each other, but the boys could go into the water? I wonder, what did my brothers think?
They paid no attention. I think. It didn't bother them.
No, but it was obvious if you were looking for it.
But that's it. It's invisible because it's taboo. Because you're not supposed. Because as you said, we're not supposed to talk about this.
Yeah.
But the more we talk about it, the easier it gets to.
Now, are there any similar things in our society today that fulfill a somewhat similar role? I'm prompting you to say something you said to me once before.
Well, you have
book clubs. Book clubs.
Oh, book clubs, yeah. I did that. I've said that for the years. Actually, I said it before this.
Oh, sorry.
When I would speak about the Red Tent, people say, oh, I wish we had a Red Tent. And I say, you do. It's called a book group. You meet monthly, you talk. You don't always talk about the book. You talk about your life, your families. You feed each other. So I think that, you know, the notion of community that way is lovely. There is no evidence that we bleed at the same time under the moon. That has been debunked a million times. There's still every few months in a women's magazine, there's somebody saying, no, it's true, but medically it's not true. Anyhow, so it doesn't actually work that way. So I kind of made that up in the Red Tent too, that they were on the same cycle, which I based on, you know, there was no other light. There was just the moon. So maybe. You know. But it's a novel.
It was poetic.
It's poetic.
So here's an idea. During the pandemic in Needham, on Needham Common, we had a white tent for people to go to when they bought their takeout food and wanted to be among other people, but 6 feet apart. You could sit at a picnic table under the white tent. So we could petition the select board to create a red tent in the middle of Needham Common.
You know, when that happens, we will have transcended an enormous amount of misogyny. It will be the age of Aquarius or the age of Athena.
I know. Maybe our daughters' daughters.
Or maybe they won't feel the need because it will be just part of normal life and everyday life, and you don't have to pretend it's not happening, and everybody knows it's happening, and nobody cares.
Yeah. Now, so one of the strong themes that you've been discussing and is in the book is the lack of ritual around menstruation. That positive ritual could help girls graduate positively into this part of their life. And one of the things you've done in your career is to create Mayim Hayim, which is a mikveh in Newton. Has anybody heard of Mayim Hayim or been there?
There's a bunch of people,
where people, women,
everyone,
boys, girls, we explain it. And is there any connection between ritual, lack of ritual, in your interests as a writer and a person?
Well, for me, the mikveh was about justice, actually, more than it was about ritual. It was about the lack of access to a beautiful ritual that should be available to everybody, regardless of gender or age or whatever, or identity or knowledge base. So Mayim Hayim is a place where people go to mark transitions. The two traditional ones are conversion from being not Jewish to Jewish, and the other one is it's a ritual around menstruation, actually, so that married women are supposed to stay separate from their husbands for a period of time during their menstrual cycle. After a few days, you go to the mikveh and you you immerse and you come out ready to re-engage with your husband sexually. So, and it's a complicated ritual. It was largely rejected by, certainly by feminists, but by the American Jewish community. Really, we never had enough mikvahs for all the Jewish ladies to use. It was like old country. And it was misogynistic in a lot of ways. It was run by men, supervised by men, built by men, and there have been examples of abuse in that regard. So, but we've opened up the doors and we've made it, and so we write new rituals. The ritual is the same, but there's ceremonies around it. So early on, I didn't write these things. Somebody wrote a ritual for menarche, for a first period. So we've been open 18 years. It has never been used.
Really?
Yeah, mothers think it's great. 13-year-old girls, not so much, you know? And there are also, I've read lots of rituals, and they are very much for the mother and not so much for the kid.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because, and it's done with great love and great feeling. And I know women, Jewish, not Jewish, had a dinner party for their women friends who know this girl from childhood, and they welcome her into and sometimes that's okay. But it's definitely not coming from them.
Yeah.
When girls themselves put this together, it's a lot of chocolate and a lot of cake and raunchy and silly and funny, and America being America, you can now buy uterus-shaped invitations for your daughter's period party.
Uterus-shaped
invitations? Yeah. And pin the tail on the uterus.
On the uterus.
I'm trying to remember. It's like really, it's like anything. It's like cupcakes with, red velvet cake. And it's, it sort of sends it up. It's like, haha, now I'm a woman, and we're going to have a party for it. And so I think that's fine. That is owning it. It will be interesting to see if that develops, how that develops. We're not very good at sanctifying life cycle events, except for the big ones,
Yeah.
Marriage and death, really, for everybody, and bar and bat mitzvah for Jewish kids. But so I don't know where we're at with that. But I learned, I laughed out loud when I read the stuff about period parties, and when they're run by girls themselves. And who do they invite? They invite whoever they want, and that includes boys.
Some of them.
Yeah.
Good for us. Now, how does the subject of menstruation and this book relate to your overall career and your interests in choosing the topics for your books?
I think it's about telling untold stories of women's lives. Not just women, but untold stories generally. So people who don't make it into history books. And that is certainly women's lives. And I read Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own in college, and where are all the stories, she says, basically. Where are all these stories? There's nothing written by women about, really about their lives for centuries. So it's up to us to fill in the blanks, and I feel like I'm part of a generation who not only wrote fiction, but did anthropology and sociology and psychology to unearth women's stories. And the ones you can't find, that's what fiction's for. So I invented a lot of the red tent because she doesn't, and classically, she doesn't say a word in the Bible. So what happened from her point of view? It doesn't really tell you. It's told by other people who had skin in the game, particular kinds of, they had interests there. So I think that runs through, and resilience. I think those are two themes that run through the nonfiction and the journalism and the fiction, and certainly this.
So we're coming toward the end of my many questions. Let's bring it back to the personal level again and talk about how one's feelings and perspective on menstruation changes during life as you get older. I always considered my period to be primarily an inconvenience. And yet, when I was 50 and I went through menopause, I felt sort of wistful about it because that meant no more babies. And I even felt positive about it because, after all, if I didn't have a menstrual cycle, I wouldn't have become a mother, and it was the best part of my life. So that's the way I ended up feeling about it, sort of, a little bit misty. How about you? And by the way, that was quite a while ago when I was 50. That was 18 years ago.
let's see. I never felt like I mastered menstruation. I always felt like I never knew when it was coming, and I was always, it was like, I really didn't get it. I tried to keep track, and it didn't track, and I felt like I was failing in some weird way. It was a pain in the neck, but I didn't suffer a lot of cramps after high school. I went through menopause 50-ish, but I'm still having hot flashes 20 years later. So it was a slow.
See some nodding heads.
Yeah. At least once you know what it is, it's really, here we go again. Yeah, it's part of life. And, you know, doing the research for this book, thinking about this, has made me realize how maybe dissociated I am, or was, from this process in my life, because I didn't know enough about it, because it was an inconvenience, because I didn't think I was doing it right somehow. So, to me, it's, you know, it's in the distance. There's a wonderful book called what's it called? The menstruation. Jen Gunther, who's a physician, and she writes for the New York Times Online, and wrote the Vagina Bible, which is really great, and I used it a lot, and I interviewed her, and she's written a really, like, a big, like this book on menstruation. Anything you want to know by Dr. Gunther is terrific. But again, that's something people don't talk about. And when they have talked about menstruation and menopause, it's always, you know, in terms of popular culture, it's always snarky or mortifying. And I think that's changing. If you watch anything, if you watch any screens, the number of times menstruation comes up, the number of times menopause comes up without it being snarky, by just sort of part of life, it's remarkable. It's been, and it's happened very quickly in the last, I mean, it's been building. I think it'll have a lot to do with the fact that women are makers, that women are producing, writing, and starring in these shows. And they are just writing about their lives, and that includes having a period.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from being good friends with Anita for a long time, she is a manager. She is on top of things. So the fact that, I mean, she manages to write book after book after a great book. The fact that you feel like you didn't manage it, it's just so un you. It says more about society than it does about you.
Okay, let's blame society. Yeah.
All right, now we're toward the end now, and since our conversation is a library event, we'd like to end on a literary note. At the end of the period, end of sentence, Anita talks about a poem by Emily Dickinson, which, when you look at it the way Anita looks at it in the book, is really fascinating. So let me hand it over to you.
Well, there's a kind of a funny end at the end. It's sort of the Menstrual Arts Hall of Fame. So there's Judy Blume's book, you know, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and Judy Chicago, and this poem, I looked for poems about menstruation, and they're mostly terrible. There's a beautiful one by Lucille Clifton in the beginning, but so I wrote this. I'm just going to read you. Emily Dickinson did not write about menstruation explicitly. Then again, explicit was not her style, and yet her 1862 poem, which is called, the first line is, the name of it is Autumn, is drenched in blood. Scholars have long assumed she was referring to the blood of the Civil War battlefields, which is entirely possible. But read without the cultural blinders of menstrual shame, these lines in the book, the shower of stain and the upset basin, suggest a more personal interpretation. So this is Emily Dickinson's poem. The name of it is Autumn. The hue of it is blood, an artery upon the hill, a vein along the road. Great globules in the alleys, and oh, the shower of stain when winds upset the basin and spill the scarlet rain. It sprinkles bonnets far below, it gathers ruddy pools, then eddies like a rose away upon vermilion wheels. She was a strange cat. She really was. She really was. And it also, it helps with Dickens, it's always great because of the dashes. It makes you read it differently. So, yeah. But so I think this is an alternative reading that a lot of Dickinson scholars would not agree with. But
that word stain.
The shower of stain, the scarlet rain, the hue of it, it gathers ruddy pools and eddies like a rose away. I mean, it does sort of.
It works.
It works. It works.
It's also, of course, about the Civil War, but it works
Maybe.
at different levels.
She never said what it was about.
No.
I mean, scholars interpret it, and with good reason, as Civil
Yeah.
War, but
Yeah.
she didn't write footnotes.
She never sat in front of a room of friendly
No.
people like this and talked about
This
her
poem is
work.
about the Civil War. No.
Well, thank you, Anita, for helping us see red today. Ha ha. Now we'd like to open it up for questions. Does anybody have any? Debbie.
More of a statement. I used to be a children's librarian.
Because, could you come up here and speak to the, yeah, because there's
Here,
no.
use my little,
And I'm the
Yeah, okay,
microphone.
okay.
I used to be a children's librarian, and when Judy Blume, I'm dating myself, but she came on as, so, I'm not good with this. Anyway, and I'm wondering if there are any children's books or adolescent books now out talking about this subject, because back in the dark ages.
That was it. That was the book.
Yeah.
No, there are lots. There are lots, and one of them was banned somewhere in the South. They didn't want
Of
a book
course.
about menstruation. But there's there's a great graphic novel, and then there are books about pretty much, from, I think, probably 4th, 5th grade on up. There's a lot of...
Nothing younger?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that, but maybe if there's a book about anatomy, I would imagine they would include a new book about human anatomy for small children, that would be part of it, as opposed to skipping it. And I haven't seen Red. Has anybody seen the movie? This movie about the panda? It's called, Red Panda. Is that the name of it? Red Panda. It's a movie about it's a animated movie about. I haven't seen it because I don't have Disney Plus, but I will get it. But it's all about a young panda coming of age, getting her period, and she becomes giant, and she has big emotions, and so that's a Disney film.
Yeah, that's great. And
yeah.
pandas have the white pants problem.
Well, this is a red panda. There are red pandas.
Oh, there are.
Oh, okay.
Okay, any other questions? Yes?
You could just.
Here, I'll do the Phil Donahue thing
yeah,
and
that's
come
good.
to you.
When you spoke of meeting with somebody about the anatomy, and I'm wondering whether it was a gynecologist, because my dad was an obstetrician and gynecologist, and I'm remembering that there were, and I don't know the depth of things, but you said that women didn't have to have periods, but I think in some sense they do, just for general, we call it hormone health. Not that it needs to be suppressed the entire time, that might be in some time. But, Dad's knowledge, I'm already 67, so Dad's knowledge was particularly old, so I don't know where the science has come in the meantime.
This was a nurse practitioner from Planned Parenthood. And the whole notion of period suppression is controversial, both from sort of, this dates me, crunchy granola people who think you should free bleed and, you should be proud of this, and you should, howl at the moon, and I'm being obnoxious. That's not nice. But there are people for whom menstrual periods are so painful and so difficult that this is for, at least for some period of time in your life, a really good alternative to suffering like that. But it's, again, you mess with women's physiology, and there's a lot of backlash right away from people who, that's not what you're supposed to do. This is the body, the mother, the body, and we're living in a time again of controlling women's bodies and not letting women, they're coming after birth control next. So there's a lot of resistance to actually dealing with people, with women's needs, with the needs of people with uteruses, and giving them choices about what does and doesn't work. There's some, I know I've talked to pediatric gynecologists who have kids who come into them who are so much pain, and they really can't go to school. And when they try to talk to the mother about, let's put her on birth control pills, that means they're going to be sexually active. It has nothing to do with that. It means controlling pain and giving her back control and being able to go to school again. So it's just such a complicated thing. It's about misogyny, and it's about patriarchy, and it's about distrust of the body that bleeds. And we have a long way to go, but we're talking about it. Mm-hmm. We are really talking about it, and which is a big breakthrough.
Yes.
There. I have so many things to say, but I guess try to keep it succinct. So I'm a mom of a she hasn't quite hit her menarche, but I'm also clinically or professionally, I'm a women's pelvic floor therapist, and I've seen these girls further down the line, and you used a term, that dissociation, like just not knowing your body and having a block here. And I've seen the repercussions of that in the clinic time and time again, whether it's related to periods or related to incontinence, any of the above in terms of pelvic health issues. I'm looking to shift my care towards younger women and girls so that they can just have that body literacy that they need. And I also am hearing you say these period parties and like this, all this talk is kind of more in for the mothers, right, or the caregivers.
Well, it can be, but if you go, I'm not on TikTok, but there's a world of sharing of stories and parties and information. Some of it's not accurate, but a lot of it is. And girls are creating with help, are making content about what menstruation is like from girls for girls.
Yeah.
So it's a very uneven, and there are parts of the world where people still don't know how to name these parts of the body. So, and that includes in this zip code. So I don't want to, again, it's not far away. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. But my dad was an optimist. And I really have to say that I see that there's a kind of unwillingness to shut up about it among younger people.
Yeah. I guess my thought was in just being immersed in this world, if you had suggestions for how it could be best received by girls approaching this stage of their life, this education. To set them up.
In terms of, education, I'm not an expert about this. There are people who really know how to do this better than I do. But some of the interviews that I did and things I read, for some women who grew up and their mother took them out of school the day they got their period, and they went and had lunch, and it was a really special day, and it was just the two of them. And that's memorable, and that's genuine, and it doesn't feel like imposed. So there are ways to, and in the Maori tradition, fathers would give their daughters a particular green stone as a gift, so a necklace or something. So there are ways to acknowledge a change of life without it becoming for the mother, but something that you share together. So I think we don't need to make it a ritual, but you can make it a family tradition. And those can be just really simple and beautiful. There's a story in here, a friend of mine, it's from a Sephardic Jewish family. She got invited to her grandmother's tea when some afternoon coffee thing, and she served when she got her period, and then she was allowed to wash dishes with her older cousins in the kitchen and hear all the dirt. So that was the gateway into gossip, into grown-up lady girl gossip. So and it's not a ritual, but she remembers this vividly, and she actually talked to her cousins, and they don't remember it, but she said, I know what was going on. So it, I think you have to trust your kid. You have to listen to your kid too. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask a question. Did you not get a slap on your cheek?
No, I did not get a slap on my cheek. No, and you know what? A lot of people didn't. I mean, the Jewish tradition is you get a slap when you get your first period, and
And what do you do that for? I don't know.
Nobody knows why. It has no basis in anything religious. It's a folk custom.
I've heard an interpretation that it was a way to reduce the shame because you were losing, I don't know how much medical sense, but this is what I've heard, that because you're losing blood, you become anemic and pale, and the slap rejuvenates your face so you can't be identified as being on your face.
That sounds like, let's clean it up. I mean, it's like, don't get pregnant. And, the thing is, a friend of mine was telling me her mother, long past, gave her a tap, and she asked her mother, why did you do that? She said, I have no idea, my mother did it. It's like, no idea. No idea. No.
Well, think of how many things we do that we have no idea why we do them.
But it's not a positive thing. It is not even, if it's a real slap.
It wasn't negative because it wasn't a real slap.
But it was a patch. It was like, it was a.
More like a
revive.
Yeah, well, it's also don't get pregnant, I think. I think it's like,
It didn't spark.
no. But many people have never, I've been to Jewish audiences with young women and they've never heard of it. They didn't do it. I didn't do it to my daughter.
Interesting. Yes.
I'm wondering if you've heard this idea that until birth control, women didn't get their periods that often because
That's
they were
right.
always pregnant or breastfeeding. So it was actually the exception. And then
Yeah.
how do you think that feeds into the idea of the taboo?
Oh, it became an illness. I mean, doctors medicalized periods in the 1800s. And yeah, it was considered an illness, you know, that
Because it didn't really happen
incapacitate.
that
Well, they didn't before that. No, you didn't have as many because you had 15 pregnancies.
Right.
Maybe they didn't all last. And then there was a period of time, lactation, less menstruation, and you lived shorter. I mean, all of those things together means that people like us are menstruating for a lot longer than our ancestors did. So it does change things. It does change the physiology.
Well,
I'm
it
not
changes the relationship to the rest of the world
Yes.
because it's happening every
Right.
month,
It happens every month.
whereas it didn't used to. Not really.
It didn't, yeah, right.
Not in.
Right, and so you didn't have to manage it that often either. So it was not the same, monthly trial. But you were pregnant a lot, and you were nursing a lot. So you were, I don't know what the trade-off is there.
Yeah, it's quite a trade-off,
Quite a
21
trade-off.
years of
Of childbearing.
raising a child.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, well then we'd just like to invite Patricia Doyle to the front to talk for a minute about Days for Girls, and then we'll say goodbye.
Thanks. Okay, so Days for Girls was started by a woman who went to Africa. She went to an orphanage, and eventually the orphanage director got in touch with her and said they were out of food. Could she do something about food? And so she thought, well, I don't know anything about food. So she prayed about food, she went to bed, and the answer she got in the middle of the night was ask them what they do about sanitary supplies, which she thought was a very strange response to the request for food. So she asked the director, what do they do? And he said, oh, we send the girls to sit on a piece of cardboard until it's over. So they sat on their bed, and I saw pictures of the bed. It was like, imagine that, and it was bunk bed, bunk bed, bunk bed, like crammed one next to the other. Because of AIDS, they have way more orphans than they used to. So if you were like there, you had to go in here and crawl over all those beds and sit there till your period was over. So she said, that's ridiculous, they need supplies. So she got like a month's worth of supplies donated till they could actually get to the place. And so they got there, all the chain link fence holes were like full of used sanitary supplies. They're all over the street because they didn't have rubbish disposal there. So she said, they need reusable things. So she went out and she bought some nice white flannel and made these nice, what looked like pads that we would have, and they were not very successful with that because the whole blood taboo around the world, you can't hang those things out. And, so the kit has gone through about 28 iterations at this point. So this is what girls get in places. They don't get these kits until after they have got all of the learning that Anita has said has lacking so many places. So if you look over there, you can see that the chart. It shows, where your cycle, where you're actually menstruating, where you can get pregnant, and the whole flip chart goes through everything. The man's parts, the women's parts, how you get pregnant, how you keep from being trafficked, etc. And once they've explained all of that, they give out the kits. So the kits come in this drawstring bag. The girls wear it like those little backpacky kind of things. And inside, they get another little bag. And this little bag actually has a waterproof backing in it so that they put their used things in this little bag. So then they can carry them home. This bag actually you can fill with water, and you can sort of rinse your things out in the girls' room and dump the water if they actually have that available. So they get that. They get 2 pair of underpants, which for some girls is really nice because they're brand new. They get a face cloth. They talk all about keeping yourself clean down there during that time of the month. So they get the face cloth, and they also get a little bar of soap, the sort of. And then this is the main part of the thing. This is the thing. Something. These are like pads. They're reusable, and these are the holders. And so the holder just snaps like this around the crotch of your underpants. It keeps things in place. It has these pockets at the end that keep keep the pads from moving, because the original design had a piece of ribbon here just to keep it sort of in place. And when they asked people for their feedback, they said, it's really great, but sometimes it makes me look like a man, because as they walked, their thighs would make the pad kind of keep inching forward, so they thought, well, that's not what we're aiming for. So now there are pockets on the end of there. This thing, the really great thing about this is it has that same waterproof material inside it. So even though the pad gets soaked, it doesn't get through to their clothes. But the pads themselves are really amazing, because when they hang them out to be on the wash line, they look like face cloths. So they can hang this out. If you notice, there's like two layers here, but when they fold it up, there's 6 layers. So there's 6 layers in the business end, but if you notice, it's got a little strip here that doesn't have that. That's so that when you fold these up, they're easier to fit in under the pockets. Because not only can you have one that you can fit 1 in, but the other one in the kit comes with 2 in there. So the girls literally see when they get their kits, you have a heavy day, or you just happen to have a really heavy flow, you can put 2 in. And I think you could probably even fit 3 in there if you really needed to. So each kit comes with 2 of these holders, 8 of the pads, a couple pair of underpants, the soap, the washcloth, the bag, and then there's also a little card in the back that sort of reminds them how to use the kit, how to fold the things up, make sure you put it out in the sun. With 2 layers like that, the sun will kill all the germs. If we were to make them so that they were as thick as they wind up being, the inside would not dry in many places, particularly hot, humid climates, and then you wind up with infections and molds and all sorts of things like that. And then the other side shows them how, it's a place for them to start tracking their period. So this is what we make. They go all over the world. I just had somebody come on Friday afternoon, a girl from Bentley College. We went up there one afternoon. We were invited to be part of, some sort of thing that they had going on. And this girl came in and she said, I'll be back. And she came back and she said, I called my friend. The girl's family's from Liberia. She was born there, but she's moved here and become a citizen in the meantime. She is going home this summer to Liberia. And she has a really good friend there who lives in a very, very small village working with girls and women out there. She said, not only do they not have any supplies in that village, if you get to the next bigger place, they don't have anything there either. So she went off with 50 kits to take to this village. So, yeah, so it's really exciting when you know things are going. We sent some to the Ukraine. Some have gone up to Lowell to help with the Afghani women who tend to use, reusable things anyway over there. They were used to using fabric. It's a much cheaper option. If any of you are still you need to go buy sanitary supplies, the cost, it just seems unreasonable what they charge for the product that you get. So they get this and then they don't have to be buying supplies. The kits last for like 3 years. So in some parts of Africa, every additional year that the girl is in school, she earns something like 10 to 20% more over her lifetime. So if anybody wants to get involved, that's an option. You do not have to know how to sew. We have parts of the process that require no sewing whatsoever. And if you know anybody who is in a situation, like Anita said, it's not just over there. If you know somebody who needs this, let us know, because we have kits. And there's no reason for girls here to not have them.
Have you thought about giving it to school nurses, especially in underprivileged neighborhoods?
Yeah, and my sister is teaching up someplace north, and I said, talk to the school nurse, and the nurse said, if everyone can't have them, then I don't want any. Because we said, girls who are in need, the ones who keep showing up to the nurse's office, because when I first started doing this, somebody said, would you mind if some of the kits you made stayed here? And I said, well, yeah, like wherever, whoever needs them. And she said, well, some people like to think they're helping those poor girls over there. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't care. If they need them here, give them here. If they need them there, give them there. Like I don't know any of these people personally, so I don't have any vested interest in them going one place or the other. And even when the woman that we used to took them to Africa a lot, to Uganda, and she would go into the nurse's office or the headmaster and say, who's missing school because of... Mm-hmm. Right? Because we don't have enough to give one to every single person in the world. So they're trying to hit the girls that are missing school because they didn't have their periods. And this school nurse said she wasn't interested unless everyone could have them. And I thought, well, since almost everybody in that school district is, free or reduced lunch, it would hit almost everybody anyway. So it's a kind of a funny thing. You would think it would be better, but I think some people are like, are girls gonna wanna wash them? You know, are they actually going to use them? And I'm like, if they're not going to use them, I don't want to give them the kit, because there's places where they're thrilled to get them because they have no other option. So it's one of those things. You would think you just say, great, here, and the people go, wonderful, but not always the case.
Well, it's like that principal who said they'll abuse the privilege. It's like, really?
And the question is, what would they be doing with them, right? So maybe they're going to take them and use them at home on the weekend because they don't have money to buy them. But I don't think that's really an abuse. It's like, and it's not like they're going to be throwing them around, or, you know, I don't know. How could you abuse them?
I know.
I don't really know. But anyway, we have a poster over there if you want to take a look. You can take a look at the kits. You can take a look. The flip chart, this one's actually in Spanish, but the pages and the illustrations are all the same as the ones that are in English. And if you notice over there, there's one thing that says 36% of girls in one country were missing school because of periods, and once the kits went in, they were down to 8%. Wow. So it makes a difference. Well, think what your life would have been like if you had to stay home from school every time you had your period. Particularly if you have like a longer than average cycle, you would, you know, you just wouldn't make it through. And in a lot of places, I was amazed, the place this woman went in Africa, not only did the kids not have books, the teachers don't have books. So the kids have like a notebook and they're copying everything off the board. It's not like you could go home and like call your friend and say what went on in class today, you know, like you're just like behind. Each month you're getting further and further behind. So
Are you accepting donations?
Yes, we have a white bin over there if anybody wants to donate. And no, they're like a heavy cardstock. So
we have a question over here.
yeah.
It's more like a comment. So I've been part of some of Patty's sewing circles. So if you talk about kind of like a red pen, it's an amazing thing to be part of it, because there's a whole bunch of women making different parts of this process and talking, and you feel like you're doing this amazing thing, because you're not just giving money, but to make these kits is like, it might cost $10, but the labor that goes into making the different parts, because it's very specific, is a lot. And some people do one part, people bring their sewing machines, other people do other parts. And it's like a community of women, mostly. I mean, men can do it too, but I've been there when women's been there. And they end up with these kits, and you feel like nice to the girl in school and continue our education. If anyone's like considered, talk to Patty, because it's such an amazing thing to be part of.
It is. It's just so nice. And we were just doing this at my house with some other people that I knew that were quilters. And then we were approached by the temple. They had gone to some sort of temple event or event for women from different temples. And they had seen this there. And then they came home and they thought they should do it. And then they found that we had a group, it was online. And so they said, well, could you come and just be there the first time we did it? And so we went, and it was pretty obvious it would be a good idea if we went back again. And because well, we have a thing that cuts out the shapes of those things, and we have a thing that puts the snaps in, and it's just easier if you have the equipment. So we would show up with the equipment, and we went a few more times, and then we just kept going, and then we kept going, and it's, you know, Catholics and Protestants and people with no religious affiliation whatsoever, all at the temple. And the woman who started that thing said to me, just about before sort of COVID hit, this was not what we intended. We intended this to be an event for women at our temple to be together as, you know, Jewish women doing a project. And she said, but this is so much nicer because it's just women. It's just women getting together to help women. And there are a lot of women around the world who need the help. They have no options, right? Because, you know, the men say this and the men won't that, and the men won't let you in the kitchen and they won't let you in the whatever. And it's like, you know, if there weren't women who were menstruating, those men wouldn't be here, right?
Let us end on the note of women working together with women in a red tent-like situation.
It's great.
And Pat, you'll be here for a bit, and Anita will be here for a bit. So if anyone has any further questions or would like to chat, please come on up. And thank you, everybody, for coming. The Friends of the Library's final program of this season is about the future of the suburbs with a really great city planner who's going to talk to us about what's coming in towns like Needham. So please consider joining us on Sunday, June 12th. Thank you.